From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Thursday, January 15, 2026. Iran, the most exotic and romantic of countries, rich in history and blessed with natural beauty and immense oil and gas resources, but now into its fifth decade, crippled by a brutally repressive regime that seeks to export its brand of militant Islamic fundamentalism to the world via terror proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis. In recent days, the regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has crushed a rebellion that started with the shopkeepers of Tehran's Grand Bazaar. So what happens now? Foreign editor Greg Sheridan is here. A year ago, the Islamic Republic of Iran was the all-powerful sponsor of Hezbollah, Hamas and the Houthis, working towards a nuclear weapon, rich in oil dollars, standing strong against the United States and Israel. Now, Iran's terror proxies are broken, its nuclear program is under a cloud, its economy is crippled, and its streets are flowing with the blood of Iranian civilians who tried to rise up against repression.
President Trump is urging Iranian anti-government demonstrators to keep protesting, promising help is on the way.
The large-scale protests that began in Tehran and spread to several cities appear to have subsided, replaced by pro-government rallies broadcast on state media.
The 26-year-old who was arrested days ago during demonstrations is now facing imminent execution.
In the final death pangs of a regime, they are at their most dangerous.
The rioting began with the food sellers and hawkers of Tehran's Grand Bazaar and has spread across the 90 million plus population of this vast country. It's been met everywhere with the guns of a sprawling security infrastructure that brooks no dissent. We've been here before with the 2019 uprising over economic hardship and the 2022 protests sparked when morality police beat to death a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, for allegedly wearing her headscarf incorrectly.
Women in Iran set their headscarves on fire in fury. They are tired of the morality police beating them up and the Islamic Republic leaders who police their every move.
This time, at least at first, the uprising seemed different. From exile, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi called on Iranians to rise up. Donald Trump promised to strike the regime if it murdered its own people. Among the diaspora, there was hope. Now, that hope seems to be fading. Greg Sheridan is The Australian's foreign editor. Greg, we're seeing huge unrest in Iran, reports of tens of thousands of bodies. Hard to confirm because, of course, the Iranian regime has shut down communications. Do you feel that this is going to be the end of this regime, or do you feel that it will survive?
Claire, quite pessimistically, I think it's likely the regime will survive. The government has opened a little bit of the internet today. They wouldn't do that if they didn't feel they were in control. There's no sign of a splintering in the security forces. The very scale of the bloodshed indicates that they're not losing their nerve about killing their own citizens, and they're not having trouble getting their security forces to kill their own citizens. Some of the well-known moderates within Iranian life are calling for a crackdown, which means they don't see any alternative to the regime. The government is still functioning, and if anything, the numbers of demonstrators seem to have eased off a little bit in the last 24 hours. So, as usual, if a dictatorship can convince the army to kill its citizens in very large numbers, it tends to hang on to power.
What's the calculus for Donald Trump now? He almost encouraged the protesters out. He's said that if they were able to take control of the state's institutions, that would be a good thing. He's indicated that he would strike Iran if it killed many of its own people, which of course it now has. What does he do now?
Well, Trump is revealing himself as a neoconservative. I mean, move over Woodrow Wilson, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Franklin Roosevelt. Only a few weeks ago, Trump's national security strategy said, we no longer have any interest in the internal affairs of other nations. We don't care how they organise themselves, meaning we're not worried about human rights. But here he is saying, if the Iranian leaders, he says, I'm concerned about all the death. If the Iranian leaders kill their people in large numbers, we will strike them. Now, there are a lot of problems with that statement. First of all, it's a good thing that Trump is on the side of the demonstrators, a very good thing. And that's where America should always be, on the side of liberty and democracy and against dictatorship. But it's hard to see how a strike from the air can materially aid the demonstrators. You can't bring the regime down with airstrikes, and the people are being shot by individual soldiers and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps members and Basij militia members in the street. Well, you can't really deal with that from the air. Trump may yet decide not to do anything. We're speaking on Wednesday afternoon, so we don't yet know, and in which case his words were a bit problematic because he's encouraging people to risk their lives with an American promise of support. Now, he's not responsible for them risking their lives because these demonstrations have occurred independently of Trump. On the other hand, there may be militarily sound reasons for striking Iran's attempts to reconstitute its missile program. The Iranians are scared of Trump. They're scared of Benjamin Netanyahu. They are suffering from sanctions. Trump is intensifying sanctions. So whether he decides to do a sort of a demonstration strike, a military strike on a specific target, maybe a strike at some of the leaders, although I don't think he would strike the Ayatollah Khomeini. Look, it's genuinely very unpredictable, but it's hard to see how it materially affects the position of the demonstrators.
Coming up, why this uprising started with the most unlikely of revolutionaries. You've written very evocatively about the shopkeepers who were some of the first people out on the street as part of this unrest. Included in that group were some of the shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar. What does it mean that it's shopkeepers who are out on the streets voicing their rage about this regime?
It's very dangerous for a government when it loses the support of shopkeepers because shopkeepers are non-ideological. They're not left, they're not right. They're interested in the functioning of their businesses, and they are, if you like, the coalface of everyday life. If the shopkeepers can't function, that means ordinary people, ordinary families can't get bread and milk and eggs and tomatoes and what have you to just keep normal life functioning. Now, Iran is a very sophisticated culture that inherits the great Persian culture, and it has great traditions of scholarship, it has brilliant filmmakers and so on. It has always had a sophisticated urban class which despises the mullahs regime. But that class could never bring about political change on its own. The latest revolt, different from the one provoked by the death of that young woman who didn't wear a hijab, with sufficient piety for the mullahs' liking, the latest revolt is based on economic collapse. A lot of things to learn from that. One is that all the folks who told us the American and Israeli strikes on Iran would lead to a great surge of patriotism in which the people supported their government were just talking absolute moonshine. The people despise their government, and the government is not functioning for them in any way at all. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 has delivered the Iranian people nothing but despair, isolation, economic misery, and conflict with the world's most powerful military, the United States, and also with Israel, and they've got nothing in return. So that made it a very dangerous revolt because it mobilised people far beyond the urban liberals. It mobilised working class people. There were strikes. It mobilised workers. It mobilised people in villages and on farms. And you felt that that was a moment of maximum danger. But the Iranian regime in its way is quite sophisticated in knowing how to hang on to power. It resembles in many ways the North Koreans. The North Koreans are the worst regime in the world and have the worst human rights and the worst economic performance, but they're extremely sophisticated about staying in power. And the Iranian regime has some genuine support on theocratic grounds, so they're like the Taliban. They don't want life to be happy and successful. They want it to be miserable. They don't want you to enjoy music. They don't want women to be equal to men and so forth. But it also has created quite a big and very corrupt class who live well while the majority of people live poorly. So the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the most important military force, they have a much better material standard of living than the ordinary Iranian. So they would think if the current order collapses, they're likely to go down the totem pole, perhaps quite radically. So that gives them a big motivation. I mean, Putin does something similar. He always makes sure his bodyguards are very wealthy. They're very well rewarded for what they do. And that gives them a strong motivation to stick with him. And dictatorships don't typically collapse when they get more dictatorial. They typically collapse when they start to liberalise and they allow some social space for an opposition to get organised. Well, the Iranian leadership is not going to allow any space like that. So I think the outlook, sad to say, is very bad. On the other hand, they are a bankrupt and hollow regime. And I'm sure the Americans and the Israelis will be trying to entice someone in the Iranian leadership to lead a revolt. But that seems to be unlikely because it didn't happen at this maximum stress moment. So I think we can say, sadly, it looks like the bad guys have survived. But on the other hand, they are scared of Trump. They are scared of Netanyahu. The people hate them. There are a lot of movable parts in this. There are ethnic minorities which are armed and which hate the central government. So there's a lot of moving parts in this story. But for the moment, the regime looks to have held on. You know, you could get some good things out of this because every dollar the Iranians spend on a nuclear program and missiles is a dollar they can't spend on food. Now, if they're scared of their own shopkeepers, they might want to spend a bit more money on food and a bit less money on a nuclear weapons program. So there are ways that this could get a little bit better, but this regime is going to learn one key lesson out of this, which is if you want to stay in power, you've got to be willing to kill thousands and thousands of people, and they've always been willing to do that.
Greg, you always make me feel better about the world, and at least in this case, you've made me understand it. So thank you very much. Greg Sheridan is the Australian's foreign editor. Thanks
so much, Claire.
Greg Sheridan is the Australian's foreign editor. You can read all Greg's reporting right now at theaustralian.com.au.